So today we have a very special speaker. Her name is Dr. Kristen Eccleston, and she is from Weinfeld Education Group, which they do a whole bunch of things. So I'm actually going to let her introduce herself, but she specifically focuses on social emotional behaviors and is fantastic at what she does. And so with that, the only thing I'm going to tell you is that we are going to run the program and then stop at the end to ask questions. If you want to start doing writing questions, she may answer them, but go ahead and write them in the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end. And we will try our best to wrap up by 1 p.m. Eastern time. So with that, let me turn this over to Kristen.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you for that welcome. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. So if everyone give me 1 second to get that pulled up. All right, and hopefully everyone can see that. So welcome to Less Stress Parenting. As Wendy said, my name is Dr. Kristen Eccleston. I'm here from the Weinfeld Education Group, which we are a education consulting firm full of amazing advocates. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to speak to you today about social emotional needs and the impact on student executive functioning and what we can do to ensure students are receiving the support they need to be successful both academically and from a mental health standpoint. As an education consultant and the director of the Weinfeld Education Group Social Emotional Services, I specifically work with families of students who are struggling with school engagement and success in relation to mental health and/or neurodiversity needs. And I really do feel passionately that every student has the ability to be successful when provided with the right resources and learning environment. So without further ado, let's jump in. So during today's presentation, I want to focus on 3 areas primarily, but please note, as Wendy said, I will save time at the end. Please ask me any and all questions that you might have. This is an area that I am very passionate about. So let's get started. So let's start with understanding how mental health can play a significant role in impacting a student's executive functioning. I think oftentimes we hear executive functioning in relation to students who might have specific learning disabilities or are neurodiverse, which we will talk about here in a few minutes. But I also want to point out some of the major impacts that executive functioning can have in relation to a student's mental health. So let's start with what is executive functioning and why it's important. So executive functioning is one of the most important skills we have as students, as adults, because it is the thing that allows us to manage our thoughts, our emotions, our actions, which in turn what allows us to stay organized, prioritize, plan, take action, process our emotions, adapt to change, think through our choices, and ultimately be a successful individual. So executive functioning is just not the ability to write down my homework, package up my binder in a way that keeps me organized. It's really our ability to do everything. You know, what is our long-term task going to look like? How am I going to process this information? How am I going to plan for that vacation that I want to take? It really has to do with everything that encompasses our thought and our planning and our taking action. But even if you or your child is someone that has a relative handle on executive functioning, maybe you are someone who's always felt like I'm a very organized individual, it's important to understand what happens to our ability to apply executive functioning skills when mental health needs come into play, especially with mental health being so significantly prominent right now amongst our youth. I think most everybody is aware at this point in time that there is a large youth mental health crisis that is at play right now in schools and in general, with a large amount of students who have experienced increasing needs with mental health, I would say prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic has definitely exacerbated what we are seeing and what we are dealing with in terms of youth mental health, especially in the academic school setting. So currently, 58% of students are reporting concerns associated with their mental health, which means that over half of our student population is struggling with social emotional needs, which is most likely also means that half of our students are also struggling with executive functioning skills. And I'm going to tell you just in a minute how those two things relate and how they impact one another. So a 2017 research study showed that selective and shifting attention and cognitive abilities are specifically affected when students are coping with anxiety and depression. So while the role of stress is incredibly impactful in impairing students' decision-making abilities, anxiety plays a major role in impairing sustained attention. So if you maybe were a student who didn't have executive functioning needs in the past, and you as a parent are recognizing, why is my child becoming so unorganized, or what's going on? These weren't issues or concerns in the past. It's important to recognize that some of the mental health might be at play for what you are seeing or experiencing with your child's executive functioning needs. So although I hate to continue to harp on the pandemic, student anxiety has increased by 71% since the pandemic, which is a significant number. 71% of our students are saying, I am dealing with some level of anxious thoughts, anxiety, things that are impacting me on a day-to-day basis. So if that's the case, there's a high likelihood that their executive functioning is also being impaired by the stress and the anxiety that they're experiencing. Additionally, children and adolescents with poor executive functioning skills may struggle with emotional regulation, impulsivity, and inattention, which places them at an increasing risk for developing mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, and essentially could impact, if they're already dealing with ADHD to some level, it could increase some of those ADHD symptoms. So long story short, executive functioning and mental health play a pivotal role in relation to one another, because a lack of executive functioning skills has the power to increase mental health needs, while mental health needs has the power to increase concerns with executive dysfunction. So I'm going to get nerdy with you for just a second. As a brain scientist or learning scientist, I always am interested at, when I'm learning these things, what is happening in the brain though? Like, what does this mean? How is the brain's part or role in this taking shape or form? And so let's take a look at the brain for just a second. In the brain, there's two primary types of matter. Typically, you'll hear people talk about gray and white matter. For the purposes of today's conversation, I'm going to focus predominantly on gray matter. So gray matter has a large number of neurons present, which allows it to process information and release new information through axon signaling found in the matter. That's not the most important part here, but what is important to know is the gray matter throughout the central nervous system allows individuals to control movement, memory, and emotions. So now you can see how that gray matter is playing that role in that executive functioning that we established at the beginning. If executive functioning is how you are processing your emotions, how you are accessing your memory or organizing your memory, and that's being impacted by the gray matter in your brain, that's why they go hand in hand with one another. So gray matter is essentially very important to having proper executive functioning skill abilities. But childhood trauma is hypothesized to broader gray matter volume, which means that it essentially impacts or shifts the way gray matter is structured in the brain. And that ultimately can impact cognition, it can impact emotional regulation. So when a brain has lower amounts of gray matter volume in it, it is a higher risk, the brain is at a higher risk for developing mental health disorders, including depressions and psychosis, which is important to consider given that 71% of students are reporting having that increased anxiety since experiencing the pandemic, meaning that 71% of students are also experiencing potentially that increase or that shifting in their gray matter in their brain, which is then leading to those shifts in their executive functioning ability. So if you are noticing that your child is all of a sudden not as organized as they were in the past, or maybe a hard time with organizing tasks or staying on top of things or doing homework, and you're trying to figure out what's going on, this could be one of many explanations of what is happening. If the pandemic hit them specifically hard, especially in that mental health area, it could be what is leading to this shift in executive functioning that you're now observing in them. So I've told you all the information related to why mental health and executive functioning are impactful, but I also want to talk about ways that we can help students. It's not a lot of use to you, right? If I tell you all the things that are the issue, but I don't offer any solutions. So let's talk about some things that can be done to kind of make some gains towards helping to increase executive functioning abilities and reduce stress in students. So there's many things that can be done. This list here in front of you is just, it's just a small list. Obviously, mental health care, having therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists that your child is meeting with on a daily basis, or not daily, but on a regular or frequent basis is important. Supportive relationships, having someone that they feel like they can connect to, that trusted adult. If your student does have an IEP, sometimes a support or service on there can be having access to a trusted adult. So having someone they feel like they can talk to, if at school, at home, that they can connect with. Quality sleep is a big thing. And especially in today's social media world of TikTok and Instagram and all those other things, I'm sure there are parents out there who are struggling with kids who are addicted to technology. It's a constant battle to get them to go to sleep on time because they want to text with their friends or be on social media till all hours of the night. But that quality sleep plays a big role in having a healthy brain, which leads to that healthy mental health. Balanced nutrition. There's a lot of research that shows that having a healthy gut is essentially the same as making sure that you have a healthy brain. Research suggests that if your gut health is in check, it will help reduce anxiety, it'll help reduce depression, it'll help you think clearer, have more cognitive clarity. So having that balanced nutrition is really important, especially since we know kids love a good vending machine at school during the day. Making sure they're getting access to healthy meals at home is really important. Physical activity, so making sure they're getting out, they're walking, they're involved in sports clubs, whatever it might be. Mindfulness practices, that can be deep breathing, it can be yoga, it can be meditation, and access to nature. There is a lot of evidence to support that going out in nature, feeling grounded, can make a big difference in feeling more connected to the environment around you and helping to disconnect from some of that technology that is leading to stress. Because let's face it, we only ever put the highlight reel of our life on social media, which often leads to unexpected or unrealistic expectations of what life should look like. And especially for our youth who don't understand that, we're not all going to Bali on private jets over the weekend. It's good for them to have a more disconnected approach and ability to access nature and be more grounded and in reality. So let's also talk about understanding the role neurodiversity plays in relation to a student's executive functioning. So we've talked about mental health and executive functioning, but if you are a parent who has a child, I'm sure, who is ADHD, especially, you are very aware of what executive functioning can look like. But let's go ahead and start with what neurodiversity is, because there are some people who are wondering, okay, I hear this term, it's thrown out all the time. What is neurodiversity? And neurodiversity really is this all-encompassing term that really just houses any of the diagnosis that might go along with essentially being neurodiverse. So you can have autism spectrum disorder, you can ADHD, dyslexia, social emotional needs, auditory processing, sensory processing, all of those things fall into that neurodiversity category. And what that means is that your brain just views and takes in information differently than a neurotypical brain. But one thing that I like to point out all the time, and this is kind of a sidebar thing, but something that I think is important to note is if you were to put neurodiversity and being neurotypical on a scale and weigh them, they would weigh the exact same. There wouldn't be any difference in one being better than the other. It truly is just your brain's way of how you are processing, viewing, seeing the world, and taking in information. Where it often runs into issues for people who are neurodiverse is that things like school are set up to be a very neurotypical friendly environment, that there's a one way to do things. This is the structure that it's supposed to look like. And when you're neurodiverse, your brain doesn't always adhere to that. Your brain likes to see things differently or likes to think outside the box or needs a different way or approach to learning. And hence, why often students who are neurodiverse feel like school is not for them, or there are struggles in school that end up popping up. So that's kind of my sidebar soapbox for the day, but I want people to understand that really there is no negative aspect to neurodiversity. There's pros and cons to neurotypical neurodiversity, but it really is just this idea of how your brain takes in information and processes the world around you. But let's talk about how it relates to executive functioning. So research suggests that up to 15 to 20% of the US population is neurodivergent. I would argue that there are way more people who are neurodivergent than the 50 to 20% that is listed. And that's because it doesn't account for students that haven't been identified. It doesn't account for adults who don't realize that they are also neurodiverse. And I can tell you, I am neurodiverse. I have ADHD. I'm always very open about my ADHD, but I didn't learn that I had ADHD until I was 30. So I went through school as a struggling student, as someone who didn't enjoy school because I didn't get identified as a student who had ADHD. And I can promise you, with this being the world and the realm that I work in now, I meet adults all the time who are also neurodiverse, who had no idea that they were neurodiverse, because sometimes being neurodiverse comes with masking. So you might realize, okay, this is a quirk of mine. People don't seem to be receptive of it. I'm going to tailor that back or tone that down. And then you do, and you lose that piece of you, and people don't identify you because that quirk has been squashed by you, because there's feelings of rejection sensitivity associated with it. And so people don't recognize, or teachers don't see that there's that neurodiverse aspect in it. Or sometimes there is a spectrum, just like when people talk about the autism spectrum, even with ADHD and other neurodiverse diagnoses, there is a spectrum to levels of how much you are impacted by something. So sometimes people don't pick up on it, or it gets missed. So I believe that there is probably a much larger population of individuals who are neurodiverse than we are currently recognize that there is. So before you is a list of challenges that are very common for neurodiverse individuals to face in relation to executive functioning. It makes sense that neurodiverse people engage in executive functioning in a range of ways. There are benefits to thinking differently, but challenges present themselves too. However, there are ways to ensure neurodiverse individuals receive the support they need to overcome challenges with executive functioning. But just real quick before I move on to the next slide, let's take a look at what some of these challenges are. And that can be something as simple as asking for help. I mentioned a few minutes ago that oftentimes people who are neurodiverse have this idea of rejection sensitivity. They're afraid of asking for help. They're afraid that people will think down on them, or think that something is wrong with them, or why don't you know this information? And so asking for help can be a very difficult challenge because there is that fear of rejection that is associated with it. It can be this idea of changing an approach or thought. Change is very scary. Nobody likes change. The brain doesn't like change. The brain very much is a survival instinct not to go along with change. And that was because a long time ago, when we were primitive man, you went to that watering hole and there was a saber-toothed tiger, your brain needed to remember, let's not go back there again. So it gets really fixated on negative things or things that could be changed, because it's essentially trying to always keep you alive. And even though you might, from a rational standpoint, realize that change could be beneficial to you, that's why change is scary to your brain, though. Your brain goes, hey, I'm alive right now. I don't know that I want to change things up because I don't know what change could bring for me. And then also finishing projects and reaching goals can be hard, especially for people who are neurodiverse. Oftentimes, they are some of the most creative, outside of the box individuals that you will ever meet. And ideas are pinging to them left and right. And sometimes it's hard to finish the idea because their brain's already moved on to the next idea. And also neurodiverse individuals are usually driven by the excitement of a task. So if they start off on a task and they're really excited about it, and for whatever reason that excitement starts to dwindle, it gets that much harder for their brain to continue with the task, because that dopamine that's being flooded into their brain, that excitement is no longer there. So therefore that motivation piece becomes very challenging and very hard for them. I often think of it as this idea or this concept. If you thought of a car that had been broken down and you needed to move it, and you put it in neutral, you get behind the car and you start pushing it, eventually you're going to get momentum and you're going to get that car moving. And as long as that car is moving, you're doing great. But the second you have to stop that car or slow it down and you get in front of it, it's hard. It's hard to stop it. It's almost painfully hard to stop that car. And then you have to start that process all over again once you want to start that car back up. And that's a lot of effort. And that's kind of what the brain is doing for individuals who are neurodiverse when it comes to tasks. Sometimes starting and stopping can be the thing that makes it lose the momentum, because it really is hard to restart that task or re-engage that brain once that brain has moved on to something else. Monitoring goals is hard because, again, pinging all over the place with ideas and thoughts and things that you want to accomplish and do. Waiting to speak for a turn. Oh, my husband yells at me all the time about stuff like this, that I'm constantly interrupting. And I say to him, I apologize. It is not something that I am attempting to do. One of two things happens as an individual with ADHD when you're interrupting. One, if I don't say what it is I am thinking, I promise you in 2 seconds when there's a pause in the conversation, I will have no recall of what it is that I wanted to say. Or two, if I am trying to be polite, not interrupt, and I'm trying to hold my thought for that pause in the conversation, now all I'm thinking about is my thought, and I am no longer hearing what the person is saying to me. So that's also why you find people with ADHD tend to jump in and interrupt. I promise you it's not because we're trying to be rude by any means. And working in a group can be hard too, just for different dynamics. Again, that rejection piece, that idea of, am I going to put myself out there and people aren't going to like it? Are people going to pick up on some of my quirks as a learner? Am I going to be smart enough to be in this group? Because there is a lot of self-doubt that comes with individuals who are neurodiverse, especially our youth. There's a study that suggests that children who are 10 years old have already received up to 20,000 negative messages already in their lifetime by that age of 10 in relation to, you're lazy, or you're not trying hard enough, or you're so smart, if you just tried harder, if you just got it together. And those really start to weigh on students. And ultimately what that comes down to is that executive functioning piece. We often believe that students already know how to have executive functioning skills. We just assume that it is that they know how to write down their homework, that they know how to organize their tasks, they know how to keep their notebook in an orderly way. But we can't make assumptions that that's a skill set that just comes natural, especially for some of our neurodiverse individuals. We have to assume that they're going to need support in learning those skills. So, like I said, sometimes it comes naturally, but sometimes we need those levels of support. So it looks different for every neurodiverse individual too. And that can sometimes be a challenging piece too. You might have one child with ADHD and you make a checklist and you use a timer and that works perfectly for them. And then you might have another child with ADHD and that doesn't work for them. And that's the thing with people who are neurodiverse, you typically have to find a process or a program that works specifically for them, their brain, and their individualized learning style. And sometimes that can take trial and error, but it's always important to involve the child in that process as well. Oftentimes, I think as adults, we go, well, this organizational system works for me, so I'm going to put this organizational system in my child's lap. I'm going to teach them how to do it. I'm going to teach them that this is how they stay organized, because in your brain, it works for you, but in their brain, it might not work for them. So asking for their input, how do they think they need to stay organized? What would be important for them to be included into a plan would be really important, because ultimately they're going to be the ones who have to implement whatever organizational strategies you're providing them. But two, you want them to feel invested. You want them to feel like they have a say in it, and you want them to get the skill set. Because again, that's what it's coming down to, is that missing skill set and having to teach them the proper skills in order to have that executive functioning skill set. So let's talk about why executive functioning is not a one-size-fits-all approach. I mentioned already how the educational setting is very much so a one-size-fits-all approach. You go to school, you sit in rows, you raise your hand, you are expected to be called on, you're expected to do your homework in a certain way, even when they teach you math problems, which in my mind, as long as you get to the right answer, right, that's the biggest thing. But in school, you have to be able to show that you could do the math problem this specific way, that it was taught to you. You can't differentiate or deviate from that formula, because how will teachers know how you got the answer if you don't do it this particular way? And that can be really hard for students who are struggling, both being neurodiverse and struggling with executive functioning, when their brain is so much saying, this is the way I need it to be, or this is how I need it to be presented to me, or maybe they don't even know the way that they need it to be presented to them, but it's just not being presented to them in a way that is conducive for how their brain learns. So executive functioning is the same thing, not a one-size-fits-all approach. It has to be individualized for the student. And that's because students vary in their cognitive abilities, their learning styles, and their experiences. Every single one of us has experiences in life that have led us to view the world, see the world the way that we currently view it. And that's the same thing with children. They have had experiences, educational experiences, life experiences that have led them to see the world a certain way. And executive functioning refers to a set of cognitive processes that helps us plan, organize, initiate, sustain, monitor, and adjust our behavior to achieve our goals. These processes are essential for daily life, such as problem solving, decision making, time management, and self-regulation. Hence why you get a lot of individuals who are ADHD who tend to show up late or can be impulsive at times. And that's just because those executive functioning factors are differentiated for them. However, individuals differ in the level of development, their strengths, their ability to have the executive functioning skills. And some individuals may have strong skills in organization and planning, but struggle with the impulse control and have emotional regulation. Or some people might have great emotional regulation, but don't have any organizational skills whatsoever. And then some other students might have trouble with sustaining attention. Their working memory might be impacted, but they're very flexible and they're willing to problem solve. So it's hard. It's almost like this a la carte, and you never know what combination of skills and weaknesses that you're going to get in an individual. And that's why executive functioning also has to be individualized for the learner. And that doesn't matter if they are neurotypical, neurodiverse, if they're struggling with mental health, but those are all things that will impact the executive functioning ability and have to be addressed when trying to find what skill sets and supports are most appropriate for that individual child or student. It's also important to know too that executive functioning can be impacted by genetics, personality traits, physical health, and environmental factors, and educational opportunities too. If your child is in a school building where it is very structured, they have great support, that would be very different experience than a child who is in a school setting where maybe it's not as structured or the supports are not there or as readily available. So that can even play an impact on a student's ability to learn those executive functioning skills. And it also will impact how that student learns how to approach tasks. And that in turn will also impact their long-term executive functioning skill abilities. So it's important to recognize that executive functioning is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and that individuals really do require tailored strategies and support to develop and enhance their executive functioning skills based on their individual unique strengths and weaknesses. So executive functioning skills are important for that emotional regulation, that managing the stress, the adapting to change in situations, which again are all critical going back to that mental health piece. So again, that tie-in of why executive functioning and mental health are incredibly critical and go hand in hand with one another. So the importance of individualization. And this is important not just to mental health, important to executive functioning, important to neurodiversity. It's important for all learners despite what their profile is, because it really does maximize the learning outcomes. It helps students achieve their maximum potential by focusing on their strengths and addressing their specific learning needs. By customizing instruction, students can progress at their own pace and receive support in areas where they need it most. It enhances engagement and motivation. When students have a say in what and how they learn, they're more engaged, they're more motivated to learn, they're excited about coming to school. Individualized learning can help students connect their learning to their own interests and goals, which can increase their motivation and their enjoyment of learning, which is important, especially if we want them to feel engaged, successful at school. If we're looking at long-term career and college plans, we want students to have that love for learning and that excitement for learning. There's nothing that turns a student off to learning more than feeling like they're not capable when we know that they are. And so many of our neurodiverse students end up with those feelings of feeling something is wrong with me. How will I ever be successful? Am I as smart as my peers? I'm challenged. Am I stupid? All these really horrible, negative, self-confidence defeating thoughts go through individuals' minds who are neurodiverse, again, because of those negative messages, because of those lack of executive functioning skills. And ultimately, it results in a child who feels this lack of self-confidence, who feels like they're not capable of achieving things or achieving things at the same rate of their peers. But when in reality, most individuals who are neurodiverse are incredibly smart, incredibly creative. I mean,
Kristen,
yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second because we can't hear you. Make sure you didn't hear mute. Hit mute.
I'm not muted.
There we go. You're back.
You can hear me? Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't know what happened there.
No, I don't know. I don't know what happened either. So don't worry about it. Just wanted to make sure people just go back like 30 seconds.
No worries. Sorry about that. My apologies, everyone. Thank you for calling me out. But what I was saying is that having an individualized education is incredibly important, especially for individuals who are neurodiverse, because oftentimes students who are neurodiverse end up leaving the education setting feeling this lack of confidence, feeling like they're not as capable as their peers, or maybe they're not going to be able to achieve at the same rate as their peers, or something is wrong with them as a learner, when in reality, neurodiverse individuals are some of the smartest, most creative individuals that I have ever met, have high levels of potential. They have creative outside the box thinking. They're the people that you want in an emergency situation. They are quick on their feet and thinking. And I honestly believe are some of the individuals who have the capability to change the world, like cure cancer type of change the world. But oftentimes they come out of school feeling like they have been a failure, or they haven't been able to live up to the same standards as their peers. And it can take sometimes 10, 15 years post-graduating for that light bulb to go off and go, oh my gosh, actually, I'm really smart, or I'm really capable, or I can do things just like my peers can do things. Why did I ever doubt myself? But imagine what they could have accomplished in that 10 to 15 years if they had been able to come out of school being like, I got this. I can take on the world. I can do whatever it is that I want to do and put my mind to. But again, it goes back to that not having that access to that individualized learning. And what we want to do is we want to enhance and engage students and motivate students and allow them to have that say in their learning so that they feel empowered and so that they understand how valuable they are as a student and as an individual. Increasing confidence and self-esteem is one of the best things you can do to build confidence in students, to have them have opportunities that they feel like they can take on for success in their learning. And you can build on their strengths and really call out, hey, you're a really smart and fast thinker on your feet. What do you think we could apply that to in terms of where you want to do or what you want to be when you get older, and really start to kind of help them recognize the skills and things that make them special as learners. And I think oftentimes you'll hear from teachers that it is, I've been a classroom teacher, it can be hard to individualize for students, but it can be done. But I think the first thing is being able to recognize what students' needs are, how they might be different from the peers in their classroom, and really trying to hone in on what makes them special and unique as a learner, and really try to capitalize on those things. Also in education too, there's a lot of flexibility when students have 504s and IEPs. Is saying, hey, this is what my child needs in order to learn. They need to be able to have a reduced workload because they get bogged down, or too much perfectionism is happening. But ultimately, the math homework that you're giving them, it's for them to be able to show you that they have understanding of the concept. So if they do 10 problems instead of 20 and they do them perfectly, then it's showing you that they have concept or mastery of the curriculum that you're providing to them. So why do they need to do all 20? Or, instead of this PowerPoint presentation, my child makes these most beautiful posters that you've ever seen in your life. If they could make it and feel like they could draw and be creative and then present the same information that it will come across in a PowerPoint, why can't my child do that? And so there are supports that can be put in place, like alternative ways to demonstrate understanding that will allow children's education to be individualized and allow them to gain some of those skills that we've talked about in executive functioning, but also incorporate their passion into it, which will allow for them being open to learning those skills. Also, individualizing education prepares students for the future. Individualizing the education helps students prepare for their development, their critical thinking skills, their problem solving, their self-direction skills, so many different things. And again, my biggest thing is wanting students to come out of school feeling confident in who they are, confident in their abilities. I shared with you earlier, I'm ADHD. I didn't learn that till I was 30. I was one of those adults who had to wait 10 years before I went, oh, wait, I think I'm really capable and I'm really able to do more than I had given myself credit for. And my biggest mission is to have youth not have to go through that experience. They should be able to walk out of high school knowing how capable, confident, amazing they are as students, and that they have the ability and the power to go forth and be successful in whatever area interests them. So overall, individualized learning can help students achieve their full potential, increase their engagement and motivation, build their confidence and self-esteem, and address diverse learning needs and prepare them for the future, which is all we ever want for any of our students. So in recap here, talking about executive functioning in relation to social emotional needs, making sure that your child has a healthy social emotional approach to school, that their mental health and well-being is under control, that there are techniques to reduce any anxiety that may have stemmed from the traumatic. I mean, let's get it. The pandemic was traumatic. This traumatic response that they are dealing with to this anxiety and this new educational world they're being exposed to, anything we can do to support them in that area is critical to their long-term success, their executive functioning skills, and making sure that they walk out of school a happy, healthy, successful student. And if there is anything that I didn't cover in that topic today, please know that your friends at Illuminos, that at WEG, we are all here and on board for making sure that your child's social emotional learning is where it needs to be in order to ensure that they are being successful every day at school and getting ready to walk into this crazy big world that we know is out there. So at this time, I really do want to provide the last 15 minutes to answer any questions that you all might have about social emotional learning. As I shared briefly when we first started, my background is specifically in mental health in the education setting. So if there's anything I can do to support you in that area, please let me know.
So thank you, Kristen. We do have some questions. Many of them are in the chat. So just give me a second to pull these up here. So how do you work on childhood trauma from ABA therapy? Even after 5 years, it's difficult for my son to not able to learn new skills because of old trauma.
That's a really good question. And I think it's a little bit of a complex one because it all comes down to the root cause of the trauma and not knowing, and maybe you're not sure what the root cause of the trauma. Sometimes students go through traumatic events and we don't know what actually caused it. Oftentimes that's why we see increased behaviors in the classroom. But what I think teachers sometimes fail to recognize is that behaviors are sometimes a child's way of communicating that something is wrong. So trying to get to the root cause of a behavior is always impactful just because then we know specifically what it is that we need to either soothe or address. But I would say patience is also a really big thing. I had a student one time that it took me almost 2 years to establish a relationship with them because they had had so much trauma and it had stemmed from adults essentially failing them. And I know this is a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison, but they were so concerned that every adult would essentially fail them that they pushed every adult away. And that was through behaviors and acting out. And it took me 2 years of essentially showing the student that I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. I'm going to continue to support you before they finally let me in. So I think when you are trying to support children that have dealt with traumatic events, sometimes it can be frustrating, especially as a parent. And I am a parent myself, because your child is hurting. And if your child is hurting, you're hurting. And you want to fix it as quickly as you can because you want that hurt to stop for them. But sometimes with trauma, because it is an impactful situation, it's a long game. And I think everything that you can do to just stay strong, stay patient, and continue showing up and showing your child that I'm here, I'm supporting you, I'm next to you, is the best thing that you can do in trying to address that level of need.
Thank you for that. We have another question. Can Dr. Eccleston give some concrete tips to help with executive functioning that helps a child plan, especially for a morning routine, to help parents' frustration, to keep them doing the same task over and over? And you can answer that, or Evan or I can answer that, but go ahead.
Sure, I'll give some, and then I would love you guys to jump into, because there is, like I said, there's not a one size fits all approach. So I will give you an idea, but this idea might be the best thing that has ever happened to you, or it could be something that doesn't necessarily work for you. But I love charts, especially for parents who feel like we're rushed in the morning. My child is struggling with their executive functioning. And the charts can look very different. It can be something where you have a piece of paper and you have tasks, and they're all kind of individualized out. Maybe it's brush your teeth is like step 1. Then it's make your lunch is 2. And 3 is make sure all your books are in your book bag. But you spell out exactly what the tasks are on this that you want your child to accomplish before they go out the door. There can even be one of those clothespins with their name on it. And as they accomplish it, they can even move it. So they're getting that visual feedback that they are accomplishing those tasks. And if there's somebody who really needs to have an incentive, maybe there's like a buck system at your home, Monopoly money could be something. And they get $1 for every task that they complete. And then once they have $30, they get to pull out something from a bin that you have from the dollar store that has pencils, or, oh my gosh, all those crazy rubbery things that kids love nowadays, or a fidget of some sort. But something that is essentially allowing them to keep track, see exactly step by step what it is they need to do. Because oftentimes students or children with executive functioning needs know all the things that they need to do, but it's so jumbled in their brain because they need one-step directions. Trying to say, I need to do this, then this, and this, it almost becomes overwhelming, and they're not sure where to start, and then they just don't start. But if they know, okay, step 1 is this, step 2 is that, it makes it much clearer for them, and a visual representation of that can go a long way. But it's also important to know, I have a good friend who I help with things like this on a regular basis, and her child is very, very impacted by ADHD. Probably one of the smartest kids I have ever met, but very impacted by his executive dysfunction. And she has to switch it up to that chart every now and then, because eventually the excitement of the chart kind of starts to go down for him. That dopamine isn't flooding for him. And so she has to kind of get creative, or switch out the prizes, or switch out, how many points or bucks he's going to get. So just know that sometimes things can start off great, and then you'll see it start to kind of dwindle down, and you might have to revamp it. But definitely having some kind of structured system with a visual associated with it, with one-step directions, can be incredibly helpful.
And I can jump in with some tidbits here too. In terms of routine, we tend to classify ourselves as morning people or evening people, and that's true, for kids too. And so there are certain things like brushing your teeth that have to be done at night and in the morning, and you can't do it twice at night, so you avoid it in the morning, right? That doesn't work. However, there are some things like picking your clothes out for the next day, putting all your stuff back in your backpack, putting your backpack down by the door to the garage, or maybe even in the car. Things like that can be done in the evening or in the morning. If you have a child that functions better in the evening time, then keep that evening time list a bit longer and that morning time list a bit shorter to make things as easy and simple as possible. And then with regard to incentives, something to say about that too. I think our job as parents, there's this idea of kind of fake it till you make it, right? When we did community service when we were young, it was for some contest at school or National Honor Society, or, there's some reason, but we continue to do those kinds of things and volunteer our time as adults because it feels good. So for kids, if you try to have a discussion with them, well, this routine and habits are really important because that's going to open up opportunities for you. And then you're going to get into your college of choice later. And then that's going to lead to wonderful professors with great contacts, and you'll lose them before you even make it, to your second or third sentence. Sometimes our job as parents is to make things meaningful synthetically now. And so a way to do that is like Kristen was saying, you can have, it's got to be short term. They can't just see the carrot, but they have to be able to almost smell it, right? So there needs to be some kind of short term feedback for kids, and we can make it meaningful to them as parents by tying it to things that they want to do. They get to pick where you grab dinner for the weekend, or they get to have that friend over. Tie it to things that are meaningful to them now, so that that carrot is not too distant in the future where they can't smell it, right?
100%. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to move through because we have lots of questions. I'm paraphrasing this question, but any tips on how to explain ADHD to a younger child, and her neurodiverseness, I'll say. She's, I think, around 8 or 9, and she does not know about her diagnoses.
Sure. Actually, so my daughter also has ADHD, and she got her 504 when she was about 8 years old as well, too. And I have always been really open and honest with her, because I don't want her to see ADHD as being some kind of crutch, like, oh, I couldn't do this because of my ADHD, because I don't feel like that's what ADHD is. But I did want her to understand that sometimes the struggles she has in school isn't because she's not capable, it's because her brain does see the world differently. And at times that's actually going to be a superpower or something that makes her unique or stand out or makes her special. So that's always kind of been how I have based the conversations with her. I've been honest with her that, I don't always point out to her like, oh, you're going to have these challenges, because maybe she won't. And I didn't want to get it stuck in her mind that, oh, I'm going to be late all the time, and therefore she thinks she'll be late all the time, and she becomes late all the time because that's something I said to her. I wait until that challenge kind of arises naturally on its own, and then I address it. And I go, yeah, I know it's really hard sometimes to make sure that you're ready on time. And here are the things that we need to do to help you, essentially giving her some of that executive functioning support. But I have conversations with her like, yeah, it's a challenge for you. And people with ADHD have those challenges. But then I always try to offer one of the positive things about ADHD too. But I go, but you're so great. Anytime there's an emergency, you're a quick thinker, or anytime there's a student that's having a down day, I always get this phone call that you are so empathetic and you take it upon yourself to be helpful and help this student. And so I always try to point out some of those positive things, those things that make her amazing because of the fact that she has ADHD. And then when those negative or those more challenging traits come up, giving her the skill set that she needs. But I'm always open with her, honest about her. I let her know that it doesn't mean she's any less, any different, that her brain just learns differently than other people that she goes to school with. And it doesn't make her brain better or worse than anyone else. It just means her brain learns differently.
Thank you. We insist on that with all of our students as well. They can learn just as well as everybody else in the class. They just might need different strategies or tools in their toolbox. So thank you for that. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit to how do you suggest advocating for individualized education in public school setting where teachers are stretched thin and, large class sizes, how it goes around here.
Absolutely, I do. And unfortunately, it's not always this easy answer to say, hey, this is how you do it. But if your child has a 504 or IEP, making sure that the accommodations and the supplementary aids and services are aligned as closely as possible to what your child needs. So ensuring that if they need alternative ways to demonstrate their understanding, kind of that example I gave of a PowerPoint versus a poster, if they need to have a reduced workload because they become perfectionists and it takes them 3 hours to do what should be a 20-minute math assignment, then they need to do just the odds or the evens of whatever that homework assignment is that evening. Or if they need to have a task or an assignment that's broken down into those chunks. So instead of saying, here's our 2-week project we're going to be doing in class, make sure you turn it in 2 weeks. The teacher really should be, this portion of the project is due by this date. And then this portion of the project is due by this date. If you know that that's what your child needs in order to be successful, make sure that that is in that 504 or that IEP plan, and follow up with that school to ensure that they are implementing those things. I know one of the biggest challenges I face with families I work with is IEPs or 504s might have those things in place, but then the child is not actually receiving those supports and accommodations. Those are legal documents. Like, those are legal binding documents. It's not something that's a suggestion for the school. It's what the school has to be doing to ensure your child is getting the support that they need. And if you don't feel like the school is responding to you, that's where people like myself, people like Illuminos can be a big support in coming in and being that advocate for you and your child and ensuring that they get the support that they need. And that's what I do a lot on a day-to-day basis, is sitting in those meetings and holding the school system accountable and making sure that children get the supports and services they're entitled to.
And then hopefully you never need it, but there are additional steps too. You know, I would classify everything we're talking about as encouraging and reminding of obligation, you know, et cetera. But there's a next level where there's actually, you know, legal recourses, at least in the public school setting where it is a legal issue, there are some legal recourses too. So, and you know, we're happy to connect you with folks who can help you with that, but definitely start with the things that we're suggesting, and we can certainly advocate on your behalf.
Okay, another question. Hopefully this is a quick one. How is a chart different from a visual schedule?
So a chart could be something that is just a checklist, but a visual schedule is one that you could even put it on like your, I know I can't say the name, you know, the thing that you say in your house and it makes all the things do. I know they make almost looks like mini TV screens, and you can actually have a visual schedule. Up to that, you could make a visual schedule using a calendar, but essentially a visual schedule is just showing you this is where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be doing it. And you can get as detailed of this is your homework time, this is your band practice instrument time, this is your sports time. A chart is essentially saying this is what you need to be doing. This is a step or a direction that I need you to take. I need you to unpack your lunchbox, put the ice box in the freezer, that type of thing. So that's kind of the differentiating of it. One is more steps, like action based, and one is just letting you know what you're supposed to be doing at that time.
Yeah, I think schedules manage time and the charts manage tasks, right? So you might have in the schedule, this is the time for your nighttime routine. But then you have on your chart, here's during your nighttime routine, here are the 6 things that you do, right? So I think that they can work hand in hand. They're not the same thing, but that's how I would describe them.
Awesome. Okay, I think this is our last question. What support is available for parents realizing that the things we have been taught about parenting do not teach us how to embrace neurodiversity or EF skills? Sometimes I feel bad because of my own frustrations with my daughter. I need a place to go to talk and continue to learn how to develop new parenting skills. So I'm going to answer that first. We have wonderful parenting coaches that we work with for this exact purpose. I am a big fan of Rachel Bailey. You can look her up. She has videos you can watch that are fantastic. For our families, we also try to give them that support for the parenting side. To help parents go through this. You're not alone. When you first get that neuropsych report, it's a tough one to read through. You know, all of us have gotten that are on the panel right now, and you know, it's a lot. And so, you know, figure out who the right resources are for you and talk to them. Find trusted resources. You know, for us, I have parents that call all the time that need executive functioning support. They just got a neuropsych, but they're completely overwhelmed with who to go to. You know, we all know good people to send you to that are recommended on those neuropsych or psychoeducational reports. So I would just, you know, definitely reach out to people that you trust in your circle of support or one of us, and we can help you. But I'm also going to turn this over to Kristen to answer as well.
Actually, I think you answered it the exact same way I would have answered it, and just finding the right resources. There are people who exist, parent coaches, or even advocates too, who can help and just helping you navigate this. I understand that it's a new concept for a lot of people, and sometimes adults are neurodiverse themselves and they weren't identified and they were treated essentially in a neurotypical world. And so they only know how to handle things the way that their parents handled things or the way the teachers handled things when they were younger, but you're recognizing that that didn't work for you as a child and you want to do something new for your child, but you're just not sure what that is because it was never modeled for you. Then that's where you can go to those resources and those parent coaches to get that information and that support so that you can implement those new strategies.
Okay, we have one more. An audience member would like to hear about recommendations on the kind of school setting and support are best for children with neurodiversity, you know, and variety of things, from mental health to executive functioning.
Oh man, I think that's almost a webinar in itself, because there is no one setting that is great. It really does come down to the child, because you can have a child with ADHD who would who doesn't need a 504 or an IEP. My son has ADHD as well. He does not have a 504, and IEP does not impact him academically. But my daughter has ADHD and she has a 504 because it does impact her academically. So it really is hard to answer that question because every child, regardless their mental health, their neurodiverse, not diverse, really do have such individualized learning needs that there is no one magical setting. It really comes down to who the student is and what it is that they're displaying as their needs within an educational component.
So if that is the last question, we're at 101. We've done really, really well. Feel free to reach out to us. Evan is in Houston and in all around Texas, and Illuminos is in the DC metro area and sort of the rest of the world. So we're here to answer your questions, provide that executive functioning support. And you know what, if you need a great advocate or someone just to talk to about who to contact, please make sure to contact Kristen. She's fantastic. And it's not just her. They have a huge team there. They work in DC, Virginia, and Maryland.
And nationwide virtually too.
Okay, and nationwide virtually. So it's definitely, you definitely have the resources, and this will be recorded. This has been recorded. It will be posted next week. Evan, do you want to say anything to the folks in Houston?
No, just wanted to thank everybody from in and around the DC metro area, everybody in and around Texas, and then other places all around the country and the world who joined us today. This was something that we started doing shortly, after we realized COVID was going to withstand the test of time, or at least longer than we expected, just to bring information to families kind of when they needed it most. And so we love that we're continuing to do this. Kristen, you shared some really awesome tidbits with us and our audiences. Thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, for your patience answering questions. This was awesome. And yes, you'll be able to find that recording on our website. And thank you so much to everyone.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Just reminding you guys that Kristen is at, it's officially WEG now, but it's Weinfeld Education Group if you want to search for it online, or if you just search Kristen's name, it actually comes up too. So thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you at our next Less Stressed Parenting webinar. If you have suggestions for things that you want to hear, please shoot us an email at hello@illuminos.co. Again, that's .co, not .com. And Kristen, always great talking to you. Thank you so much for everything today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And we have more tidbits on, all of us are active on social media. So more free tidbits, keep in touch, stay connected. Thank you so much. Instagram for Illuminos is Illuminos_coaching, and at SAOTG for staying ahead of the game. Thank you again, Kristen. Thanks everyone.
Take care.